show where we talk about ideas that matter, and sometimes we even do art right in the show itself. Yes, today we're going to be doing parts of a show. If you've just tuned in, we have been talking about a play that's going to be at the Fringe, which is Revolt of the Beavers. It's a 1937 Federal Theater Project production. It was a children's play about workers who were actually cast as beavers who are exploited by a cruel and greedy factory owner. And they form a union. They demand higher wages. Of course, they get their wages in bark. And they get reasonable shifts. And this is led by a smart labor organizer. Kit, you've also, I'm going to introduce everyone, just in case you've missed who's who. We have Kit Bix, who is the playwright. I'm going to start with you, Kit. Kit, you've also added another dimension to this with having Hallie Flanagan be part of this.
Yeah, I added just because of the historical significance of the play in light of the House of Un-American Activities hearings and the way it was one of the plays singled out as evidence that the so-called, in quotes, evidence that the Federal Theater Project was promoting subversive or communist propaganda, which was mostly a smear of the communism, but it was done by New Dealers to try to shut down that WPA program.
And we'll be hearing a little bit about that and the scenes that you've picked. We have Shannon Twohy, who's the director, and in a little bit I'm going to have Shannon set the scene up. Welcome, Shannon. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much.
We heard about Shannon's view of directing, and if you've just tuned in and you want to hear the rest of the show, you can listen on podcast. You can go to am950radio.com and you can listen to us on podcast. We have Peter Rachleff, who is the co-executive director of the Eastside Freedom Library. Welcome, Peter.
Glad to be here.
And you're performing today.
Yes.
Everyone gets to perform. Yes, yes. We've got Zach Holmquist, who is playing the role of Paulo.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And today you'll be playing some other roles too. So this is radio theater, which I just love. And we've got Christopher Mogel, who is the associate producer, who's also an actor today.
Yes, I am.
All right. Without much more ado, I'm going to hand it over to Shannon to tell us about the Revolt of the Beavers.
Mm-hmm. We opened in Washington, D.C. in the U.S. House of Representatives. The year is 1938, and it's the Special Committee on Un-American Propaganda Activities in the United States. Hallie Flanagan is present, playwright Louis Lance, and they sit facing Chairman Martin Dies and congressmen of the U.S. House.
Mrs. Flanagan, can you introduce yourself once more for those who have just joined us?
I am Mrs. Hallie Flanagan. I'm a producer and director of the Federal Theater Project.
And will you explain to the gentleman here what the Federal Theater Project is?
The Federal Theater Project is a government-funded jobs program for the relief of unemployed theater workers. It's a branch of President Roosevelt's Works Project Administration, the WPA.
And can you briefly just tell us what your duties are of your position?
Certainly. My chief duty since 1929-1935 has been to combat un-American inactivity.
Inactivity, you say?
Yes, I refer to the inactivity of professionals, Chairman, artists and theater workers who at the time when I took office were on the relief rolls.
After all those theaters closed, there were thousands and thousands of us on the dole. You basically had to be penniless to get on the FTP payroll.
Mrs. Flanagan, I want you to put the relief angle aside for the moment and ask you this. What, in your opinion, is the primary intent in the selection of material for the plays you chose to produce?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Is the purpose amusement, or is it the teaching of, particular ideas? I mean, the presentation of certain facts or material portrayed in such a way as to leave a particular impression.
We chose such plays as we felt the government could stand behind in a program which is national in scope, regional in emphasis, and democratic in attitude.
Democratic?
Not democratic in the narrow sense, but yeah, democratic.
Right. Well, what concerns me is an admission you made here that some of the plays, 26 to be exact, that were produced by the Federal Theater Project are propagandistic. Is that true or untrue?
What I believe I stated yesterday was that to the best of my knowledge, we have never done any play which was propaganda for communism.
So you did not produce 26 propagandistic plays.
What I said...
One of the works in question was a play for children, the Revolt of the Beavers.
Beavers?
Well, of course. In literature and culture, beavers are traditionally associated with industry. They are, as we say, nature's engineers. And so the playwrights, Mr. Lance and Mr. Saul, felt the beavers were the logical choice for the narrative since the play concerns workers.
The response to the Beavers was an almost hysterical one. It was, in all of its important aspects, a real classic kind of Robin Hood story. It was a basic story about the suffering poor and the oppressive rich, which was classic, you know. It's all through history.
In fact, Mrs. Flanagan, doesn't Revolt of the Beavers depict a rebellious gang of workers who seize control of the factory in which they are employed, violently expelling their employer, who is portrayed as rich, greedy, and unscrupulous? Now, let the records show that in the review of the work, Mr. Brooks Atkinson of the New York Times wrote, "Mother Goose is no longer a rhymed escapist. She has been studying Marx. Jack and Jill lead the class revolution."
Little boy, come here, little boy. What's your name?
Paulo, this is my sister.
Are you a good Marxist, Paulo, or a bad Democrat?
You saw the play, Marco. How would you describe it?
Well, it's about a bunch of poor beavers who work for a mean rich beaver.
And then a hero beaver named Oakleaf organizes the other beavers and gets them to stand up to the bad beaver and demand their rights.
And so the play teaches children that when they grow up, it's okay to kill their employer because they don't want to work for a living? Mr. Paulo, is that what the play taught you? Or if not that, what?
I think never to be selfish and to share.
That it is better to be good than bad.
Chairman, they are children. It was a play about how children... How they want to, what's important is that they want...
How children want what? What do children want?
How children want the whole world to be 9 years old and to share.
Mrs. Flanagan, do you agree that plays are primarily for amusement?
No, I cannot say just entertainment. Congressman dies.
And that brings us into a forest where Paulo and Kim are carrying their book bags and they're walking home through the woods.
So just a time out before we go into the next scene. That was fun. I kept, as I'm reading it for the first time on air, I'm going, gosh, what did I watch this week? Wasn't there a congressional hearing this week? Doesn't this have some like reminiscence to this? And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes.
It's all theater.
Oh, it is. It is. I was expecting to be asked some questions about my text, but thankfully this was about the 30s. So that was very cool, and that is part of the show. Mm-hmm. The show then transitions from this congressional hearing to more of a the fantasy of the beavers. Mm-hmm. Correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So now we're going into Beaverland.
Yes.
All
well,
right.
pre-Beaverland.
This is the forest before it became Beaverland.
Exactly.
All right.
Uh-huh.
All right. Well, we have 4 more minutes in the show, so I think we've got plenty of time to at least get us through most of the real forest. And if I need to jump in, I will. But let's just take it from here and explore the real forest.
Sounds great. It's Kim and Paulo walking home.
I love that story. And the beavers, they're construction workers, and I like construction. Plus, they work at night, and I like the night. Plus, they're semi-aquatic, and Kimmy, you know how I like to swim. Anyway, it's a real story.
It's not a real story. Beavers don't talk. It's a fairy tale.
She's a professor, and she says it's real. She's probably read 100,000 books and has sailed across the 7 seas.
Paulo, she's not a professor. Mrs. Barry teaches 2nd grade.
Well, Mom says she's smart enough to be a professor, and I believe her. Probably she studied animal languages and can interpret what their gnawing noises are.
Paulo, I don't know what the old lady has told you, but Mrs. B exaggerates all the time. When kids flunk a test, she tells them they're doing fantastic. She's a school teacher who calls herself a professor, and she makes up fairy tales and thinks that because we're 9, we'll believe everything.
The professor says that sometimes the real world is so full of lies that the real things become the fairy tales, and that fairy tales are so full of truth that they become real.
Have you ever seen a beaver pop his head out of the woods and say hello? I don't know, Paulo. Dad can't find a job, and Mom has to keep the house cold all day when we're at school. It'll be years before you can save up enough pennies from the lemonade stands to buy that pair of ball-bearing skates you want. Besides, things are really dangerous now, and I'm tired of these grown-ups thinking we're gullible and they're not giving it to us straight. Paulo, we're 9. 9. Do you realize that in 9 years, we're going to be the ones who have to solve the world's problems? Mrs. B ought to stop wasting our time with stories and teach us the sort of thing we need to know to solve these problems. Public policy and physics and world history, not stories, not fairy tales.
Do you at least believe in those?
What, shooting stars?
Close your eyes and make a wish.
Oh, come on, Paulo, it's getting darker.
Make the wish.
Fine, okay.
Wish first.
I wish Dad would get a job and that I'll spot $1 on the way to school tomorrow and buy Mom a new dress.
No, not that. Our wish.
What? Okay, what do I wish? Hurry.
You wish that we could go to Beaverland and talk with the talking beavers and that everyone in the world were 9 years old.
Okay, I can wish that. Come on.
Plus skates, ball bearing.
Paulo, we have to go home right now.
1, 2, 3, wish.
And now you go to Beaverland.
Yes.
Yes.
And in the original Beaverland, there's like roller skates, right?
Yes, so we still have the reference to roller skates. Good thing on a thrust stage we're not having people skate right off the stage.
Well, I have to tell you, I know Kit and Kit, there was something about Kim that really reminded me of you.
Oh, boy.
Which is great fun. Well, this is a delightful play. And it's a play that's relevant. It's a play that you need to go see. And so we want to remind folks that you can go to the Fringe.
mnfringe.org, and then look up Revolt of the Beavers. We also have a Facebook page, or a Facebook event page underneath Revolt of the Beavers. And you can that will take you directly to the Fringe page where you can order tickets, or reserve tickets, sorry.
And the first show is August
3rd at
August 3rd.
Yep.
And there's 5 shows altogether, so you don't miss them. Go and fill up the whole great big thrust stage. It's well worth seeing. Plus, not only does the proceeds go to ACLU, there's a big push to vote. And if you've not registered to vote, we want you to vote. So this is an activist progressive play, and we're glad that you're listening to AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. And we'll be right back after a break.